All right, this is Shadowdark Campaign Diary number 5. Um, where did we leave off? Oh, yeah, we left off. They had just gotten back to the town of Galena from their journey to the adventure Cursed Abbey of the Dragonfly Horde, I believe it was called, from Shadowdark creator Kelsey Dion. Um, they defeated the Dragonfly avatar of Anazaptra, this ancient, mostly forgotten Dragonfly deity, patron type deal, during which, in a very close, tough fight, they'd had their NPC ally up there, Marina, the priest of Madeira. She had her head ripped off by the dragonfly. It was very sad, at least for some members of the party. My goblin wife got over it fairly easily. So they had their carousing. They they picked up their bard ally, who the sad NPC, or the sad PC, had sort of turned down. And then my Luke Goblin wife had no problem relating the stories to. So I started off this session. This was like the lore session, man. A lot of lore. I think we played for like 5 hours. And in some ways, not a whole lot actually happened. I enjoyed it. I had a good time. Hopefully they did too. But yeah, kind of the reason this was the lore session was in between the previous session and this session, the PDF for the player's guide to the Western Reaches dropped. So the new Kickstarter that's going to be fully released and delivered physically later this year got its PDF for the player's guide and pardon me, Jesus. The Dungeon Master's Guide is the only big piece of content left to be released from that. So, pretty exciting. So basically, I spent the intervening time between last session and this session really just diving in to all of the lore, or at least the relevant parts of it, that she released for the in the player's guide. Specifically, Madeira. I was super happy to get some more stuff about Madeira because that is the primary deity of Galena. I had already decided that. And then also the deity of the priest who just had their head ripped off. And our PC, my buddy's character, the goblin lawful priest of Madeira. So, and one of the bits that was released was fleshing out the creature Wrathgamon. Wrathgamon, I don't know how to pronounce it. The only other place that there had been any connection mentioned between Wrathgamon and Madeira was, I think, in Wrathgamon's description in his stat block. Sort of like really the only like lore basically in the Shadowdark core book is found in the descriptions of like the creatures and items. And I think it mentions there that Wrathgamon is like Madeira's like first creation, carved from white marble, sits on the highest peak of the highest mountain in the world, kind of watches over all creation. And then in the player's guide, Wrathgammon was made into a full patron, which is sweet, including, what are things that the patron wants to receive their boons, just more general lore, more lore on Madeira as well. And in the previous session, the priest had, as mentioned before, had gone down. And then after the other priest had her head ripped off, our player character, priest, rolled a nat 20 on his, I'm not even sure what it's called, but the check you make when you're down and unconscious and dying. He rolled a nat 20 on it and came back up and delivered that epic blow that I failed to capitalize on fully. But it was still pretty crazy. And the way I run Shadowdark is, nat 20s and nat 1s are always important. Something always happens. If it's just a weapon attack and it's a nat 20, or a spell attack that's a nat 20, then it's just, a critical hit, a critical spell success. But if there's ever a circumstance where there isn't already a written mechanical effect for a natural critical success or a critical failure, I come up with one in the moment, and my players have gotten used to this. We all, whenever one comes up now, they're both expecting, okay, we know something happened, so let's see what the GM says happens. So in this instance, rolling a nat 20 on your check to come back to consciousness, that's a pretty big deal. So I figured something needed to result from that. I began the session by having him in his sort of whiskey-fueled dream state. Recall the fight against the Dragonfly Avatar. He's vividly reliving in his dreams the events of the fight. The other priest going down, getting killed, himself going down, and then I narrated that because he was near the end of his death rounds. I think he was only 1 or 2 rounds away from dying when he rolled that nat 20. So I described that, as the light of this world was fading and, blackness was creeping in from the edges of your vision. Just as the world goes dark, you see yourself on the top of an impossibly tall mountain. You look down and there's the cloudscape miles below you. And you see in front of you a gigantic white lion. It looks like it's been carved of pure marble. Great, feathery wings to either side of it. And, of course, because this character is a priest of Madeira, I say, you recognize this as Wrathgammon. Madeira's sort of herald of this world, if we want to say that. And Wrathgammon says some words. I think he says something like great things for you have been written in the Covenant, which is Madeira's kind of it seems like Madeira's a combination of kind of a Bible for her followers, but then also the Covenant is creation itself. Like it's like a metaphysical thing, but that I also kind of interpret as having like, physical manifestations in the sense of like, her followers, at least in my world, like tattoo themselves. They cover their skin with, writings of the Covenant, because Madeira herself is described as having like the Covenant written into her flesh. So like, I thought it was cool. I think it's cool to sort of translate that like literally, of like her followers to emulate her, tattoo themselves, like with writings of the Covenant. So yeah, the lion says something along the lines of, great things have been written for you in the Covenant, but ever do like the forces of chaos seek to undo that which has been written. Which I think that basic concept is like straight from the descriptions of the deities. Like the, at least one of the chaotic deities says it's like it wants to rip the Covenant from the flesh of Madeira or something like that, which is awesome, metal as hell. And I thought that was a saying like, oh, things have been written for you, but chaos is always trying to seek to undo that which has been written. I thought that was a good way of like saying, it's like D&D-ish in a certain way of like, oh, you're the hero. Like, oh, you're going to do big things. Your character is going to do important things in the world. But because this is Shadowdark, and his character could die at any time, that's when you put in but chaos is ever seeking to undo that which has been written, I thought it worked. Like, I think it works pretty well for Shadowdark. And I had him sort of like, reach his big lion paw out and like lift the priest Gritst. I'll just start using their names more, I think. Gritst up from his unconsciousness and sort of retconning that whole going unconscious, and then rolling a nat 20 to come back up thing as, an intervention, a moment of intervention from, extraplanar forces. And then I had him, which he seemed to enjoy. He seemed to think the whole thing was pretty cool. And I had him roll for a boon on Wrathgamon's patron boons table. And he ended up rolling the result that said you can move as many points as you want from one stat to another. Which is pretty crazy. Pretty crazy result. I think it was like a 10 or 11 on a 2d6 roll. So not super likely, but also not like, crazy. It's not like rolling a double 1 or a double 6, but fairly rare. And he got that one. Amusingly enough, that player had forgotten his character sheet that day. So he got the one result that was the most like dependent on what your character sheet was. But he just ended up dumping all his charisma basically to increase his wisdom to 18. And then when he got back and saw what his actual stats were on his character sheet, he stuck with that decision. Obviously, I told him, like, once you see your actual character sheet, you can change your mind on that. But he stuck with that decision. I think the only difference was that his charisma was even lower than he thought it was. So he now has like a 3. I think literally his charisma is a 3, and his wisdom's an 18. So we kind of had fun with like, well, you piss off everyone now. Like you are so anti-charismatic that like you just really can't help but piss off every fucking person you come across. Even when you're trying to be nice, you are just not pleasant. You come off as a total douchebag, which is funny because this character was kind of already like that archetype. His background is a scholar, so he's been very like, well, don't you understand? Like, haven't you read before? You know, he's kind of had that attitude the entire campaign, so this works pretty well. Sort of just doubling down on how he already was. After he has his dream, and the characters, you know, wake up, get the day started, have their little breakfast or whatever, the bard character from the previous night, the NPC ally, comes down and sort of reintroduces herself. She is a character. This was kind of where more of my like lore research and lore dumping went in. She's from the city of Madeira, which is like one of, if not the main city from the Western Reaches. Certainly at this point, it is the most fleshed out city because it has its own curse scroll dedicated to it, which is already out, the PDF. City of Masks. I also like that too because there's a connection between the City of Masks and Madeira, where legend is that Madeira laid the first stone of Meridia. God, even those names are kind of similar, aren't they? Madeira, Meridia. And I had also had, this is sort of coincidental, honestly, but I also had the ruling family of the town of Galena. The sort of history of the town is that this lord led his house, his followers, and anybody else who wanted to come along, basically, up from Meridia. And I had picked Meridia just because that was like the big city I knew of at the time. There's only, or at least before more information came out about the Western Reaches, there were only like a couple cities really that had like any description of them. So I had already tied that family to Meridia. And through Meridia, Madeira, because whereas the description of Madeira is that she's sort of archaic and has fallen out of favor with most humans, and that most humans worship the newer deity of Saint Aragnes. The city of Meridia, probably, you know, partially due to its being founded by Madeira, is still keeps the faith. I don't know if that's what's literally written, but that's how I'm interpreting it, at least for this campaign in this world. So I use this bard as kind of a vessel for lore, sort of give them information about Meridia. They intuited, the players did, and I sort of described it as well, sort of feeding into their intuition of it, as Meridia is kind of like the New York of this area. It's like, you know, everybody who's from there loves to talk about it, loves to say how much they like it. Maybe if you're not from there, you're like, oh my God, here we go again with the Meridia stuff. So a couple of times now I've had her just sort of go off on like these tangents of talking, you know, like, oh, Meridia. What's her accent? Oh, Meridia, where even the hordes of mosquitoes sing songs as they drain your blood. Even the guards, as they walk around the city, sing poetry. Where the sunsets never end and the sunrises stretch on and on, you know, just like, hey, she'll keep going. She'll just keep going with this shit until you guys stop her. Like that sort of thing. Which they like. She's fun to play. I put more effort into fleshing her out than like any of the other NPCs. Mostly because I had more stuff for her to actually say and deliver. And she wasn't just a body to be there during combat. I think she also happened to roll Madeira as a follower, which is, you know, that was fine. And she got Acolyte as a background. So, yeah, I picture her as kind of like growing up doing the Sunday school altar boy, altar girl kind of deal, where she's not like in the religion, she's not like part of the clergy or anything, but she's very familiar with it. That's like her native religion growing up. So she is very interested in accompanying Gritz, the PC priest, with his, comings and goings at the temple. This was also the session where I introduced to them the new downtime rules. I kind of just wanted to have them have something to do during downtime besides carousing. They're also just cool, and I figured the players would like them, and I would like to see the players use them. And then also it helps with a problem that I'm always dealing with, although it might not be a problem. It might just be a personal preference thing, like a personal bugaboo of mine. But I always hate how little time actually passes in either D&D or Shadowdark, where they come back from an adventure, they rest, go to the tavern party or whatever, and then the next day they leave again, and that night they're clearing out another dungeon, fighting again, and then they go back, sleep for one night, go do it again. It just kind of drives me crazy. I think it's ridiculous. First of all, I think it's ridiculous that you would come back from risking your life, going through terrible things. I mean, Jesus, like the PTSD from some of these experiences. You're fighting for your life against horrible, disgusting, foul creatures down in the pitch black of the dungeons. And then you come back from these experiences and just like, oh yeah, that's cool. Let's go back at it. I don't like it from that standpoint. And I also don't like it from the standpoint of, you've been playing for 10 sessions or something, and then you look back on how much time has actually passed, and it's been 2 weeks, and your characters have leveled 5 times. And it's oh, so in the course of 2 weeks, you guys have gone from complete noobs to world-beating, fucking superheroes. I also just find that ridiculous, and I'm always trying to think of ways to entice the players into taking more downtime or forcing it upon them. And these the new rules, the new downtime rules, are a perfect opportunity to do that. Because when you look at them, a lot of it's martial training with weapons, or doing spell research. There's spiritual stuff, serving at a temple, which is what my buddy's character Gritz was doing, or skullduggery, planning and executing crimes, heists, or self-reflective meditation, stuff like that. None of these things would take one day. I think realistically it's at least a week. So that was what I said. And I think in the rules too, it says you may choose one downtime activity in between adventures, and carousing counts as a downtime activity, I believe. So pretty sure that by the rules, you either carouse or you do one downtime activity. Again, partially for realism stuff, and then also partially just for my own personal preferences of how I want to run the game. I'm going to let them carouse and then do a downtime activity. They all cost money. So well, not all the downtime activities cost money, but the better ones do. And carousing costs money. So you're still gated, you're still capped. You're still going to have to choose how to spend your money. And I don't know if it juices their characters a little bit, makes them progress a little faster, makes them become a little more powerful. more quickly than they would normally be. That's fine with me. Like, that doesn't bother me. These characters still feel very underpowered for, like, the 3 of our backgrounds coming from 5e. So that's fine. I introduced them to all those, the player, priest, Gritzt just wanted to do service at the local temple. Oh, this was also the session where I introduced Renown, and I got their Renown scores. I'm just going to track that separately behind the screen to add a little more realism to it, and then also to keep them from having another thing that they have to track. I'm splitting it up into what I call, like, core Renown, and then, like, regional Renown, where I think things like what level you are, like how strong you are, what's your charisma and all that, that's going to be like your core Renown. Like, that's going to apply anywhere, no matter where you are. Whereas stuff that's like, oh, you threw a big party, which is one of the ways to increase Renown, basically. Like extravagant public spending, I think is what they call it. Like, oh, you threw a big party, or like you did service at the local temple or whatever. That's, to me, like regional Renown. Like, that will only apply in the area you're in. So yeah, the priest going to increase the renown at the temple. I think also he kind of figured from like a roleplay standpoint, given that he had just kind of been through a traumatic experience. He just lost another follower of Madeira. I think he was feeling kind of like, now's the time to sort of reflect, do service to the goddess. That kind of good stuff. My wife's character, the Loot Goblin, went back to the seedy tavern outside of town where the sort of thieves canting barkeep had given the indication of like, oh, come back later, we got some stuff for you. So she went back. I think I said like things down in like the undercroft of the tavern, the sort of secret thieves guilty area don't really get going until like later. That makes sense to me. These are nocturnal types. So she was sort of hung out there all day. And then when it was in the evening, sort of had the barkeep give her like a, that kind of signal. And she goes down, meets the sort of door attendant, the bouncer. Gets in there, meets the, and this is like a swankier place. It's much nicer than upstairs. Upstairs is just a fucking total dive. Food and drink are all awful. Down here, it's pretty nice. It's not crazy, it's not like fucking silk plush garments and cushions everywhere, because it's still a relatively small town. Like, this is a frontier, kind of like far away from the comforts of the more civilized world type place. So it's not going to be crazy, but for the area, and especially compared to the tavern upstairs, it's quite nice. She sees a guy seated, cross-armed, at a table in the middle of the room. I describe it as a large table, with him being the only one seated there. Which hopefully, is kind of strange. Like, nobody will or wants to sit next to this guy. And I have him sort of indicate or immediately start talking to Gabo, my wife's character, when he comes in. And he's this sort of like friendly on the surface, but clearly with an ulterior motive type vibe. The sort of like mafia speaks very nicely, might clap you on the back, but you understand he will probably murder you in a second if you inconvenienced him. And again, my envision of him fitting with the relatively small size and low wealth of the overall area is, he's not he wouldn't be wearing like a pinstripe suit with like slicked back hair, eating like finest delicacies, his Chianti and his cigars and all that kind of stuff. Like, no, in this area, he's almost like an enforcer who has just kind of risen to the top. As I mentioned before, he's big, he's burly, got like a bully body, and he looks like he likes to handle things with his fists if he needs to. But he's very clever and ruthless. He knows what he's about. He knows his business. They talk. He, says to Gabo, it's good that you haven't done any work in the town yet, by which he means stealing things, organized crime. Talks about how, years of relative safety from any real threats have made the town a bit softer, a bit more decadent, a bit more open to and tolerant of his kind of work, as opposed to the dwarven town up to the north that is constantly pressed by enemies, where they don't tolerate any of this shit. Which is a town I don't think I've even mentioned in these videos. Barely any of it has come up. It's basically not anything more than a name on the map at this point. I don't anticipate them going up there until they've at least finished like one or two more adventures. But it's a dwarf town. My head is that it's a mithril town. They're mining mithril out of the mountains there because it's right next to the mountain. It'll be an opportunity for the players to buy some mithril stuff. Either when they go there or when like a caravan comes down from there. And they don't fuck around up there, basically. And it's not like Galena itself, this town, is particularly tolerant of thieving, as we're about to see, but if this was in the dwarf town, they wouldn't even tolerate this whole little setup, this seedy thieves tavern operating outside their walls. Like, they would just march in there and clear it out. A little more tolerant in Galena. This man, I think Rolf is his name, sort of enforcer, Thieves Guild guy, describes to Gabo that, we can help each other out. When you want to do some work in this town, you just let me know. I can tell you who's an easy target, who's a little harder, which of the guards take a few coppers to look the other way, which of the guards takes a few silvers instead, where guards will be, where they won't be, that sort of thing. And in return, all I ask is a little appreciation. So mechanically what this means is that Gabo, working with this character and his associates, will get advantage on his skullduggery downtime checks in return for 20% of the take. 20% going straight to Rolf. And this is also with the understanding that Rolf would not appreciate it very much if Gabo turned this deal down. So, and I think Gabo for this week, this downtime activity, had already decided he wanted to do some martial training. So he was like, okay, yeah, cool. Noted. I think he basically like agreed, said like, yeah, that arrangement sounds fine to me. And said like, yeah, when I'm back, when I'm looking for some work, I'll let you know this week. Just going to do some training. And Rolf said, all right, cool, pleased to meet you. We'll see you around. So for the rest of the week in town, in Galena, Gabo and the Ranger, the Elf Ranger, who I am just going to refer to as the Ranger from now on. The range fighter, by this point. They go to do martial training. They both succeed on their checks. I ruled that the NPCs in the party can also participate in downtime activities. They just have to pay for them like anybody else. I think of the new rules, it's 50 gold per downtime activity, which I like. Like, it should be expensive, I think, because these bonuses are, they're strong, I mean, one martial training can get you +1 to hit and damage with a weapon, which is really good, I mean, that's almost as good as, gaining a level in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I think it should cost money. A lot of money. So while those two are training, the Gritst, the priest, is doing service at the temple all week, which gave me an opportunity to describe some local flavor some more. One piece of which was I had the town priest. Mostly he was having Grits just change incense, sweep out the rooms, scrub and clean the statues, that kind of stuff, just busy work. I had him one morning, he had Grits accompany him down to the town square, and he was sort of vague about, what this was, what was going on. He's just like, oh, this is one of my other duties in town. He goes down there. This was also, Rolf had mentioned to Gabo, Rolf being the Thieves Guild guy, that one of their boys, Nob, I think his name was, had gotten pinched by the authorities, and they were going to be dealing with him. And then when Gritst and the town priest go down to the square, I describe a man, dirty looking, a criminal. Long, lanky hair, dirty clothes. He's been manacled, hands out before him, to a stump that's situated up on this sort of raised platform. There's a crowd of people gathered around watching. Over him stands a man in plate mail. Described him as shaved head, intense, bright blue eyes, older, but, still very healthy, very vital. Wearing the blue cloak of the swans. I don't think I've mentioned those in these videos, but this town, there's a lot of regular man-at-arms, your typical dude, just probably chainmail, a shield, spear, just your town guards or whatever, your footmen. But then the knights of the Lord's house are, the locals refer to them as swans, because the emblem of the Lord's house, the Lord Harcourt, current Lord Robert, is a white swan set against a field of blue. So the locals refer to these knights as swans. And, you know, they're sort of the bad dude. Not the bad, like, evil, but, you know, like, they some bad dudes. They'll fuck you up. I think this guy's name is Roland. He hasn't come up yet, though. He's a character I have named and I have fleshed out, but partially through my own, you know, what I have and have not thought of to put in front of them, and then also partially through their own decisions. He's not come up yet, but he is the Castellan of Galena, which is a term that essentially just means, like, you're like the GM. You're like the head of day-to-day operations. You keep shit running. You have, like, authority over the local area. Obviously, you are subject to the Lord, but in the day-to-day operations, like, you are the guy. He gives a little speech about how, you know, this man has been found guilty of thievery. It's a pretty short speech, but he ends by saying it's for humans to sentence. What is it? It's for men to judge, but for the gods to sentence. I say something like that. And then I have him nod over to a dude who's standing there with a huge axe. This guy steps forward. The prisoner's like, oh God, don't, no. And the guy with the axe chews down through both of this man's manacled hands, chops the hands off. He falls backwards now that he's, you know, his hands aren't being held by the manacles. It slides his stumps out of them, falls backwards, blood gushing out of his stump arms, and he's just screaming, rolling around. And then the town priest, I should probably start using this guy's name. Reynard is his name. He sort of nods over at Gritz, and Reynard steps forward, Gritz following him. They both bend down, and they clasp one of the man's hand, or previous hands, his stumps. And Reynard had just indicated to Gritz, like, just follow my lead. So Gritz is watching him to see what he's doing this whole time. He grabs the hand, and Reynard casts Cure Wounds. The Gritz also casts Cure Wounds. They both succeed. Gritz might have used luck just to, you know, make sense. Probably, it seems like an important, maybe semi-important kind of like story sort of moment. He also is very eager to prove himself to the priest. He doesn't want to look bad in front of his a higher-ranking member of the faith. So they both hit their spells, successfully cure wounds on this guy. I still had this guy make a check because he's had both of his hands chopped off and blood is gushing out of them, and has been gushing out of them for several seconds at least by the time he gets healed. So I don't know if I said it. I had something specific in my head, but it was a very hard check because I figured this guy would probably die. And certainly if both of them hadn't succeeded, then no matter what he rolled, he would have died. But both of them succeeded on their cure wounds. And then he rolled a natural 20. So I said, oh, okay, all right, this guy makes it. So I describe him as the pain doesn't let up. He's still screaming as though nothing had happened. But you see the skin sort of stitch itself together, form itself into like smooth stumps. And the man survives. Knob. So now I have to remember that there's a handless guy named Knob running around. I didn't plan that name consciously, but somewhere in my subconscious, I think I had made that connection between a man with potentially no hands and Knob. So that works. It makes that easier to remember. And my idea of this whole sort of thing was reminiscent of the sort of kind of wacky stuff you hear about from medieval times where in order to judge someone's guilt or innocence, they would do some crazy shit like, oh, we'll throw them in a pond and we'll hold them underwater for like 2 minutes. And then if they don't drown, then they're innocent. And if they do drown, then they're guilty. I think sometimes, ironically enough, I don't know how much truth there is to a lot of this. I imagine a lot of it is, storytelling, sort of myth making. But I've heard that it's like the opposite sometimes, which is hilarious, where if they say they throw you in the pond, the same scenario, they drown you for 2 minutes. And then if you drown and died, you're innocent. And then if you survived the drowning, then you're guilty. So presumably they would kill you after you survived the drowning. But yeah, I wanted this to be that sort of deal. So we're going to chop this thief's hands off. We're going to have the priest try to heal him after we've chopped his hands off. And if he lives, then the gods have determined that he can continue, Perhaps he's not irredeemable. His life could continue. Or maybe it's a punishment. Maybe the gods are punishing him by making him live through his life now with no hands. Either way. I liked it. My players seemed to like it. And I think it just... stuff like that really helps to just make the world feel lived in. Like, that there are real people with real cultures. There hasn't been a lot of that in this campaign up to now, so I think this session was probably the biggest one as far as like helping to draw the players into the world. I hope so, at least. That was my intention. They seemed to enjoy it, especially the priest player, because a lot of the stuff this session was kind of like focused at him. And then I had another sort of little local flavor thing where later in the week there was a kind of little service at the temple. I think I described it as occurring once every 3 days, where some like the middle class and the upper class folks would come and do like a small sort of private service with Reynard, the town priest. And of course, ever present, I think for any religion in my setting, is money. I describe how like the donations really come pouring in for this small, somewhat select service. And yeah, after a week in town, they finished up all of their various and sundry activities. I had them kind of indicate to me the week before what they wanted to do next, what was the next adventure they wanted to go on. And there were at least 2 adventures heading out east in the direction of Darlin Keep that I described last video. There's the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur, which is out there, which is what I've been hoping they will go to. I've been kind of trying to push them over that way, without being too like railroady. Like they don't have to do it, There's other stuff, there's other cool stuff, but it is the starter adventure, and it's a big, awesome dungeon with a lot of cool stuff going on. So I'm hoping to get them there. And then there was also the bounty for orc and ogre ears, which is, they know that the orcs are out east past the area of Darlin Keep. So another example of having multiple things in the same direction, driving the players in that direction. So they journey out towards Darling Keep. It's a 2-day journey from Galena. I don't think I had them make encounter checks on the first day. I might have had them do the first night, but not the first day. Because they were mostly on the very well-used road leading south from Galena, which connects down basically to civilization. Although there isn't a lot of traffic on that road. Most of the traffic to and from Galena from the civilized south comes through Last Watch by the sea, through boat travel. But it is the southern road out of Galena is still relatively safe, at least close to Galena. So first day, no checks. Second day, they enter the woods in between Darling Keep and the southern road. It's still relatively safe, because the military forces of Galena do, they go back and forth between Darling Keep and the town. So nothing's allowed to fester too long on this road, at least things that are direct threat to travelers passing by. But it still had to make their checks, and they hit an encounter. They ended up being goblins who were laying an ambush on the road. The priest was scouting. I don't really know why the priest was scouting and not the thief, but there we are. The priest was scouting. He did well on his check, and he's a goblin. Can't be surprised. Which I sort of interpret as they're just going to notice shit. They almost have like a spidey sense, just in general. So he notices these goblins. We have a bit of an issue. It got sort of contentious between me and the priest player for a minute here. Not over anything serious. I think we were just having communication problems. And I think it largely stemmed from me not visually graphing or drawing what he was seeing. So I was trying to describe it, and it's always very hard to accurately mentally portray a relatively complex situation just by describing it. So there was some confusion about, okay, so he spotted these goblins. Where was he in relation to the goblins? And where was he in relation to the rest of the party coming up the road from behind? It was just confusing. It took us, probably 5-10 minutes to sort of sort out where he was, where the goblins were, where the party was, and then where these three things were in relation to each other. And he also, it's not clear to me if it was confusion over where things were or if he really wanted to do this, but he was saying that he wanted to put himself way out on an island, very much separated from the rest of the party, and sort of almost like his own group against these goblins. And, part of the reason why I got kind of irritated and it got a little contentious was because I was, in my head, I'm like, dude, if that's where you start this fight, you're going to die. You're just going to die. You can't just be out on an island by yourself going up against a group of enemies. They're just going to kill you. So it's part of my worry about that happening that kind of made it get as contentious as it got. But we worked it out, we figured it out. He alerted the rest of the party. Party stops. They maybe kind of discuss what to do for a minute or two. And at this point, I've ruled that the goblins can see them. They can't see the goblins except for the two goblin player characters because, they have their can't be surprised kind of goblin spidey senses. But the enemy goblins can see the party. They've stopped in the road and they're sort of discussing what to do. And the goblins are just sort of holding their fire they haven't gotten as close as we wanted them to get, but they've stopped. Like, what's going on? And then my wife's character, Gabo, the thief, he stealths into the underbrush near the path successfully, rolls high as he always does. And I ruled then that the goblins waiting in ambush, that was their decision point. They had been watching there. They were kind of getting worried, like, oh, have we been made? Have we been spotted? And then once Gabo disappeared into the brush, that triggered the enemy goblins to say, like, okay, we don't know what's going on, but we're losing sight of them, and we need to pull the trigger on this thing. So fight starts. Nobody's surprised on either side. There were 7 enemy goblins total, sort of positioned in 3 groups around the path. The way this fight started, the goblins were rolling hot. I think they hit, like... they also rolled really high on initiative, too, and the party did not roll high. So I think, like, all the goblins went first, and they hit at least 4 shots. And I was worried. Like, the first round of this combat made me quite concerned. I was like, whoops. And they were hitting the ranger and the bard because the 2 goblin player characters were off to the side in the underbrush at this point. But those 2 characters, they made it through there. They took their beatings, and the ranger fires back. The ranger at this point has like +3 to her damage. Yeah, because her training that she just did gave her +1/+1, and then she already had +2 from her weapon mastery with her longbow. So she does a D8 +3. So what is that? 4 to 11 damage. I think these goblins only have 4 HP, 5 HP maybe. So she one-shots all of them whenever she hits, her first return fire she hit. And then the party gets to see the bard do her thing, which in Shadowdark, the bard's basically just like a bard, just a regular bard. Like, they don't cast spells really. They're just kind of like mediocre fighters. Or they can do range stuff, just sort of like jack of all trade kind of thing. But their one thing is that they can, what's it called? Fascinate, I think, where if the creatures are low enough level, which is like half their level +1, rounded down, they're transfixed. And of course, in classic Shadowdark fashion, it doesn't give you like 4 sentences of what transfix means exactly. You just kind of have to rule it for yourself. But after doing a little bit of research on my own of what she has said about it, Kelsey, and what other people have done with it, I'm pretty confident that I'm basically ruling it as it's intended, which is essentially you're stunned until you're like attacked. Well, until you're hit. Maybe I could change that, but I rule it as until you're actually hit. Just getting attacked isn't enough. So she walks up, plants herself in front of the closest group of 3 goblins, sings her song, and they're all transfixed. That really, I think that kind of sealed how this fight was going to go. Because they're able to pretty quickly like pick off the rest of the goblins that are not transfixed. And then eventually when the final, the 2 last ones come, I think she fails her, she rolled a nat 1 on her focus check for the transfix. So they come out. Then for the nat 1, I said she couldn't give luck for the rest of the day, because bards can give luck every day. As I said, nat 1s are always supposed to mean something beyond just a nat 1. Those 2 goblins, I think only one makes it. One runs off. There's a brief discussion about do they chase this goblin. And I indicate to them, like, you could chase it. You could try to catch it. But it is a goblin. They're pretty quick. They're pretty crafty. It's got to jump on you. And it's just sprinting at full speed through the forest. So you could try to catch it. You maybe can. My wife's thief character would probably catch it if it's going to come down to some kind of dex checks or something like that. But they know it would be a long haul. They don't know how far it's going to run. So they let it go, I think wisely. And this happened relatively close to the keep, so I think it's only a couple hours after this they make it to the keep. And I describe, as they're making this journey from Galena out towards Darlin Keep, these mountain ranges are rising in the distance. Because it is quite large range of mountains. They're called the Teeth. I haven't done a great job about imparting the names for everything in the world to the characters. And the gap in between the mountains, the mountain pass through which flows the river. And there's a ford at the mountain pass where the river can be crossed on foot. It's called Godfrey's Ford, named after the founder of Galena, Lord Godfrey. And it was the site of his greatest victory over the orcs. It's how it's got its name. And after the victory, they built there a keep, Darlin Keep, named after the Lord Godfrey's daughter. And they man a garrison there to keep watch on orc country, basically, and to make sure that the orcs never cross the river in force again. So they arrive there, the party does, a little back and forth with the guards on the wall. They're allowed in. It's a small keep, overlooking, the river valley and the ford down below, in a strategic location, obviously. Very bare bones, just military outpost. No comforts, no, extra furnishings. Just a stable, couple outhouses, barracks, and then the keep itself. They explain it, there's some... They'll let you bed here, if you're here to kill orcs, okay. They can sleep there. They could probably get some torches and rations to spare, but other than that, don't expect anything here. And then I also had the castellan of this keep invite them to dinner with him. And I have this guy be very interested in stories. He loves stories. And whenever he has some adventurers come through, he's always very eager to collect whatever tales he can from them. And he's also, he's a military guy, He's kind of, the whole, thirsting after tales and stories, is kind of a less serious quality to his character. Makes him, a little kind of, funny. But I still wanted him to be, a believable military man. So, while he is... eagerly plying them for stories and asking them questions in a semi-childlike fashion, being obviously very interested in what they have to say. He is also grilling them on, who are these goblins that you saw on the way here? What were there? Did they have blue paint on them? This is where the blue paint goblins from a few episodes earlier came back up. He tells them that some blue paint goblins, newcomers to the area seemingly, have begun appearing in the forest, the large forest that takes up the whole central portion of the map, essentially, to the north and east of Galena. That these blue paint goblins have shown up there recently, and they've driven all the other goblins out of these woods, which is why there's been so much increased goblin activity recently in, the parts of the area closer to Galena, closer to Darlin Keep, more sightings along the roads, things like that. He gives them some information about the local orcs, tells them a couple of I had a bunch of information about, the local orc tribes. Had a lot of information about Ramlat, the deity of the orcs, which is another big amount of lore that we had got from the recent dump from Kelsey and the Western Reaches stuff. So I think I straight up ran out of time or forgot to incorporate a lot of that stuff. There was also a local kind of like legend kind of adventure hook thing that I came up with a few sessions ago, and I was actually like thought it was pretty cool, and I was pretty happy with it, and I just keep forgetting to tell them about it. So I'm just going to have to dump it in front of them, in front of the next session, I think. It's either that or I just never mention it again, because it's such a thing that it would be It's already hard to believe that they wouldn't have heard about it. And if I go on any longer, it's just going to be, I'm either just going to have to scrap it or just dump it in front of them, because it would just be kind of ridiculous. But yeah, that's where they end. They have their dinner. They have a, long night. Not a long night, but, a couple hours with the local Castellan. He's getting stories from them. He's giving them information about the local area. He also kind of, I use it as an opportunity. He kind of describes to them the random encounter table for the mountains, basically. Like he tells them, there's wyverns out there. There's canyon apes that will stalk you from behind silently all day and then come upon you at night without you ever knowing they were there. There's, there's cyclops, there's owlbears, things like that. I think by the time he was like halfway through this conversation, my players were like, man, this place is terrible. This area is awful. And I'm like, yeah, you're at the edge of civilization. Like, you're going into the wild now. So yeah, that was where they left things. On the keep at the Borderlands, after having just got the lay of the local area.